Hello, everybody. This is a tutorial to teach you how to use Hivelytracker. Now, what I want to teach you first is the instrument editor. And you're going to want to go ahead and change the length to 1. And one of the things that you need to know to actually use this software is changing the octaves. Because to change the octaves, you press the F1, F2, F3, and F4 keys. And if you have an FN on your keyboard, you hold down FN and press the F1, F2, F3, F4 respectively. And your keyboard is set up like a piano. So Z is C. And in this case, since we have it on the first octave, I don't have it on the first. Since we have it on the first octave, it's going to be C1, and Q will be C2. So if you don't know how a piano looks, I suggest looking up a picture of it and referencing the C to figure out where everything else is. So we've got Z, which is C, S, which is C sharp, D, which is X, D, which is D sharp, so on and so forth. So I usually like to start with the bass, the lowest note you can possibly go to, which is C1. The highest note you can go to is B5. Right here is where you choose the waveform. Now, this is a very handy tool right here because it shows you which of the waveforms there are. So 0 is hold wave, 1 is triangle, 2 is sawtooth, 3 is square, 4 is white noise, and asterisk is fixed. And I'm not sure how to do the fixed, so if anybody actually knows that, then that would be great. So let's just set it for 3, which is a square. And this is where you can set commands. And you can see a command list right here. So we got init filter. And what initial filter is what I'm pretty sure it stands for. And what that's going to do is just change the filter. 20 is off. Anything below 20 is the low pass filter. Anything above 20 is the high pass filter. So I usually like to put a low pass filter on my basses. So we'll make this a bass instrument. We've got 1, which is slide up, 2, slide down, 3 is init square, initial square. And what that is, it's going to change the pulse width of your square. And if you don't know what that is, it just changes how the square sounds. So you've got multiple ways of doing that. But what I use the most is number 4, which is toggle mod. And I would imagine that means modulation. And you can either have a modulation of the filter or a modulation of the square width. And I usually go with the square width. So we'll have it on 4. And this is where you can change the square modulation. So we're going to set our speed at 2. Our lower will be 4. No, it won't. It will be 20. And our upper will be 30. And you can just experiment with that and get different sounds. So we've got that down. And then in a second we'll be making some sound, because right now we don't have any sound, as you can tell. This is where your volume is, pretty self-explanatory. This is the wavelength, and the higher it goes, the lower your instrument is. So you're going to usually have 80 as your bass notes, and 40 I would usually use as my leads, or 20. I barely use 10 or 8 or 4 because it just gets way too high. And that's how you can work around the limit of octaves, only C1 to B5. Now here's the envelope. And this is the initial volume. So I usually like to put this at 60. And this is the decay, so this is how long it takes for it to get to this from the initial volume. 6 is your decay. So I usually like to set this a little bit lower than the initial volume, probably 58 or 56. I'll try 56. And this is your ending volume. So if you want a note to go to exit out, you're going to have it at 0. And sustain will be how long it will sustain this volume until it starts to go to the release. And the release is how long it takes to get to this. So we'll go ahead and have a 2 sustain and a 10 release, and we'll see how that sounds. Yeah. But that's only because it's very low. So we'll go ahead and go to the 3rd octave. That doesn't sound right either. Sometimes there we go. And there you go. You got a bass instrument. Very handy right here. So now that we have that, we can go into out of our instrument editor into the tracker. So here we have track 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you ever use the tracker, this doesn't really need explaining, but for those who haven't used the tracker, I'll try and explain it as best as I can. So, just as in the instrument editor, you use space to go into recording mode, as I like to call it. And you can click a note on your keyboard, and then it will put that note onto the tracker. So, C. So there you go, you got a C. But I'll make it higher. And when I was first starting, I made a huge mistake. This position editor is crucial. This shows which pattern you're in for each track. And I usually like to keep 0 as blank and just switch to 1. So you saw that when I was doing 0, every note I was putting was being put on every single track. We don't want that because that'll, 1, break our microphones and headphones, and 2, we won't be able to put any other notes in it. So we'll have it 1, and we'll put our bass note. And this is kind of messing up, so I'll go ahead and change this a little bit because I don't really like it. Better. So we'll have a basic little bass pattern here. And there we go. We have a basic bass right there. Now, let me explain this. Position. That is what position you're at. So, I'm at 0 right now. This is what it's referring to. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 2, and so on. The length is how many of these positions is going to happen. And I had some problems with this when I first started because I would make up to here, up to 3, make 4, then I would save it and I would open back up and only the first would be there. And that's because I had the length set to 1. I needed to turn it to 4. So we've got this 1, length is 1, then the length is 2, 3, 4. And make sure that you change your length as you increase the size of your song. Restart is how many times your song is going to restart. Track length is how many ticks your length is going to be, your track is going to be. So we have it at 64 right now, which is a little long for me. I usually like to keep it at 32. And always work in increments of 4. I went a little bit too far. 32. Always work in increments of 4, even. And just to be even more safe, always work in increments of 16 or 8. Because it works like musical theory does. So 0 is beat 1, 2 is beat 2, 4 is beat 3, 6 is beat 4, and then it starts over. So 0 through 7 is like a measure. So now we have that. Subsongs is just if you want to have multiple songs in a file, and that'll be the subsong number and position when you have a subsong open. Channels is how many channels you're going to have. You're going to be using that because we don't want just 4. At least if you're not. If you want more than 4, you can change it. So I'll go ahead and have 6. Mix gain is how much volume is going to be added to the track. So a handy tool for that, instead of just calculating in your head what your mix gain should be, you can press auto gain and it'll put how much gain you need. It's very helpful. Speed multiplier is just to makes it go faster, and I usually like to keep it at 1. And I'm not actually sure what a drum pad is. That may be some external device that I don't know about. So then we have our bass pattern. We'll go ahead and add some drums. And I always like the label. So instrument number 2 will be our drums. And I usually like to keep my drums isolated to one track, just to save on space. So you can look at things online for details about making drums, but I usually just use some of the drums that are included with Hivelytracker and the ones that I find in other songs. So to load an instrument, you put load int, and you have a list of instruments, and you won't be able to see this very well. You may not be able to see it at all, but after you load it, you'll have a list. And if you don't have a list, you can go to Hivelytracker, the Hivelytracker folder, and then to Instruments folder. And this is where all of your instruments will be. So I'll go ahead and get a snare. And there we go, we have a snare. And we'll go ahead and put that for every 4. There we go. And I'll go ahead and put the length as 1 because that's all we have right now. So auto gain it, and it's still at 0. So now that we have that, we'll label it snare. And if you make an instrument that you like, you can also press save instrument and save that instrument. Now we're going to go ahead and get into commands, and right here is the command column. These are the command columns, and you have the command that you're doing and then X and Y. So the 7 command is to set left and right panning. It's to set panning. So I usually like to keep it at 0, just to keep everything balanced. So let's go ahead and see how it sounds with a balanced panning. I think it sounds better already. And now that we have that, let's add a kick. And the same thing with the snare. I just loaded up a preset. Now I'll just go ahead and have it every 8. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds kind of slow to me. So we'll use the F command to choose the speed. And by default, it's going to be at 6 if you don't have any F command set. So we're going to put it at 4. And let's see how that sounds. Man, that's intense. Alright. Sound good. And after we've done that, let's go ahead and add a sub bass. And this is something I learned recently. It's always great to have a sub bass to give the bass a much more flavor. So what I usually like to do is I'll set the waveform to triangle. Probably take off the modulation. Then I'll make it go a higher octave. And go ahead and put the same notes that I have for the regular bass as the sub bass. And almost forgot to change the position editor. Go ahead and set the pitch to, not the pitch, the panning to 7. So let's see how that sounds. And it just gives the bass a little bit more flavor. You can actually do a lot of things with it. You can even make it the same octave, but I don't think it sounds nearly as good compared to having it right there. And there we go. And also want to address something. 64 is the highest volume you can have. So I usually like to have my drums a little less than 64. Probably have it at like 60. Have the kick 58. The bass will be like 48. And I usually like to keep the sub bass pretty high because of reasons. So now that we have that, one thing that I should probably mention is that most of Hivelytracker is read in hexadecimal. And if you don't know what hexadecimal is, you can look it up online, but really all it is just an alternate way to read numbers. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plus A, B, C, D, E, F. So A would take the place of 10, B would take the place of 11, and so on and so forth. So if we had 10, in regular decimal numbers, then that would be 10, but that would actually be 16 translated to our number system. So you get the panning right here, and I could put it at FF. I don't really want to put it at FF, but you could. One thing that I'd like to mention real quick is that 7F is straight right and 8-0 is straight left. So anything 80 or above is left, and anything 7F or below is to the right. So if we wanted to put our base a little bit to the right, we would put it at like 10. And I sometimes like to do that if I want to separate, if the mix gets a little too mushy, messy, muddy, whatever you like to call it. So then we have that. I'll go ahead and teach you how to make a lead. And like I said, I always like to put it at C1. I'll go ahead and set the wavelength to 20. And I'll go ahead and make it 3. You can actually, I don't need to do this. You can do whatever you want. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of this. And I'm in hindsight, I may have been a little simplistic in what I've done in the instrument editor, but you can do all sorts of things. So if you want an arpeggio, you could do that. Use the 5 command, jump to step 0, make it a saw. Go ahead and edit that. But it sounds like crap when it's in a low octave, but. And there we go. You have a minor arpeggio. So you can do all sorts of things. You could even like slide up. To give like some detuning. We'll go ahead and make a copy of that without sliding. Go ahead and you can press this to mute tracks. And you see how they're slightly detuned. You can do all sorts of stuff in the instrument editor. Look at that. That's pretty nice, actually. I'm going to use that. You can do all sorts of stuff with the instrument editor. So I just encourage everybody to just experiment with instruments. I just wanted to give you an overview of this, and I think I've covered everything I want to cover. One more thing, actually. Cut is deleting pretty much, but when you cut, it keeps the information in the track that you cut with it, so you can cut this and paste it right here. Copy is just copying it, but not cutting it. Pasting is just putting it, pasting it. Note up is changing the type of the note. Not the type of note, but the note. So if you had C, you could go to C sharp, D, whatever. Transposing is what I would call it. Scale up is just changing the position of the notes. This is very handy if you want to make an echo effect. And reverse is just putting it in reverse, which it's quite not useful at all. It just puts it in reverse from as 31 would be the first beat and 1 would be 32. I mean 0 would be 32. It's not useful at all. I don't know why anybody would use it. If you just want to be backwards, then you can. And I believe that's all I wanted to cover. If you have anything else you want me to cover, just leave a comment and I'll get to it as soon as I can. So I'll see you guys later. I'm Wiseblood. I've made music with the Hivelytracker before. I have a SoundCloud page. I've made a song called Vini Vidi Vici and I used Hivelytracker. So I'll leave a link in the description if you want to hear what Hivelytracker is capable of. And that's about it. So, like I said, I'm Wise Blood, and I'll see you guys later.